Commander Vraltek sat in his command chair at Border Monitoring Station Delta 7, sipping his morning stimulant drink and reviewing the overnight reports. It was supposed to be another routine day on the edge of Korathian Empire space. Nothing ever happened out here. That's why veterans like him got assigned to these posts, easy duty before retirement. Then his display screen lit up with readings that made absolutely no sense. "What in the stars?" he muttered, leaning forward and nearly spilling his drink. His scaled fingers moved quickly across the control panel, running the scan again. The numbers came back the same. Impossible numbers. A vessel had just appeared on the outer edge of Imperial space. But it wasn't the appearance that bothered him. Ships arrived all the time. It was how fast this thing was moving. The speed readings were completely off the charts, showing velocities that violated every law of physics he'd learned in 40 years of military service. "Lieutenant Kresh, are you seeing this?" Vraltek called to his second-in-command. The younger officer rushed over, his eyes widening as he studied the data. "Commander, this has to be a sensor malfunction. Nothing can move that fast. It's physically impossible." "Run a full diagnostic on all systems," Vraltek ordered, though he already knew what they'd find. The sensors were working perfectly. This was real. Within minutes, the diagnostic confirmed it. Every sensor, every instrument, every detection system on the station was functioning normally, which meant that ship out there was actually traveling at speeds that shouldn't exist. Vraltek straightened his chair, falling back on decades of training. Unknown vessel, unknown capabilities, entering Imperial territory. Standard protocols were clear. Communications, send out standard identification protocols. All frequencies, all known languages. The communications officer, a young female named Saral, activated her console. Her clawed hands moved with practiced efficiency as she broadcast the Empire's traditional greeting. It was a message every spacefaring species in this region knew by heart. 17 different languages, covering every major civilization within 100 light years. Message sent, Commander. All frequencies active. They waited. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 30 seconds. Nothing but silence. The mysterious ship continued on its path, cutting through void of space like a hot blade through ice. It didn't slow down. It didn't change course. It didn't respond in any way. The ship just kept coming, as if their entire monitoring station didn't even exist. Vraltek felt his secondary hearts, a unique feature of Korathian biology, begin to beat faster. In 40 years of service, he'd never encountered a vessel that ignored Imperial hails. It simply didn't happen. Everyone knew the Korathian Empire controlled this entire sector. You didn't just ignore them and expect things to go well. "Send the message again," he ordered, trying to keep his voice calm. Maybe they didn't receive it properly. Saral complied, broadcasting the identification protocols a second time, even boosting the signal strength. Still nothing. The ship maintained its impossible speed, driving deeper into Imperial space with each passing second. "Commander, we need to make a decision," Lieutenant Kresh said quietly. "If that vessel continues on its current trajectory, it'll reach the inner colonies in less than 3 days." Vraltek nodded slowly. The protocols were clear about what to do when diplomatic contact failed. You escalated. You showed force. You made it clear that continuing would have consequences. Weapon station. Prepare warning shots. Target coordinates 50 kilometers ahead of the vessel's path. Fire on my command. The weapons officer's hands moved across his console. Targeting solutions locked, Commander. Ready to fire. Fire. Twin plasma bolts erupted from the station's defense cannons. They streaked through the darkness like brilliant blue comets, designed to be impossible to miss. Every spacefaring species recognized plasma fire. Everyone understood what a warning shot meant. Stop now, or the next shots won't miss. The bolts crossed the unknown ship's path exactly where they were supposed to, close enough to be clearly visible but far enough away to cause no danger. It was a universal message, one that had worked for centuries of space diplomacy. The vessel didn't even slow down. In fact, it accelerated. "Commander!" Soral's voice cracked with disbelief. "The target is increasing speed. Current velocity is now 20% higher than before. That's impossible, Kresh whispered. They should be decelerating to respond. That's standard protocol for every species we know. Vraltek's mind raced. In all his years, he'd dealt with pirates who ran when confronted. He'd faced smugglers who tried to talk their way out of trouble. He'd even handled a few territorial disputes with neighboring powers. But he'd never, ever encountered someone who simply ignored warning shots and sped up. "Get me detailed sensor readings on that vessel," he commanded, his voice tight. "I want to know everything about what we're dealing with." The sensor technician, a middle-aged officer named Threll, worked frantically at his station. After a moment, he looked up, his face pale despite his dark scales. "Commander, you need to see this." The whole composition. It's showing materials that aren't in any of our databases, elements and alloys we've never encountered, and the energy signatures. He paused, as if afraid to say the next part. "Sir, that ship's engines are generating more power than our entire station, more power than some of our destroyers." The command center fell silent. Everyone had heard it. Everyone understood what it meant. How is that possible? Kresh asked. A ship that size shouldn't be able to generate that much energy. The reactor required would be technology beyond anything we have. Vraltek finished quietly. He stood up from his command chair and walked to the main view screen. The ship was still too far away to see visually, but the computer had created a projection based on sensor data. It looked sleek, almost organic in design. Smooth curves where Korathian ships had angular edges. No visible weapons ports. No obvious shield emitters. Nothing that made sense according to conventional ship design. And it was heading straight into the heart of Imperial space without slowing down, without responding, without showing any concern for the Empire's authority. Vraltek felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of military service. Something that made his scaled skin feel cold despite the climate-controlled environment of the station. It was fear. Real, genuine fear. This wasn't a pirate they could scare off. This wasn't a smuggler they could threaten. This was something else entirely. Something with technology far beyond their own. Something that either didn't understand the Empire's power, or worse, didn't care. "Get me a direct line to High Command," he said, his voice steady despite the anxiety churning in his gut. "Priority 1 communication. Tell them we have a situation that requires immediate attention." "What should I tell them, sir?" Soral asked. Vraltek looked at the projected image of the mysterious vessel, watching it drive deeper into Imperial territory with unstoppable momentum. "Tell them an unknown vessel has entered Imperial space. Tell them it's using technology we don't understand. Tell them it ignored our hails and our warning shots." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "And tell them I believe we're dealing with something that could change everything we know about this region of space." As Soral worked to establish the communication link, Vraltek returned to his command chair. On the screen, the mysterious ship continued its relentless journey. Every sensor showed it getting closer to the populated inner systems. Every reading confirmed that they had no way to stop it if it decided not to stop itself. For the first time in his long career, Commander Vraltek felt truly helpless. He commanded a state-of-the-art border monitoring station with enough firepower to handle any conventional threat. But nothing about this situation was conventional. The ship kept coming. And deep in his heart, Vraltek knew that whatever happened next would reshape the Korathian Empire forever. The old certainties, the comfortable assumptions about their place in the galaxy, all of it was about to be challenged by this silent vessel that refused to acknowledge their authority. He just hoped High Command would know what to do, because he certainly didn't. The emergency meeting had been called at 3 a.m, Karath prime time. That alone told everyone how serious this situation had become. The Imperial High Command didn't drag its top military leaders out of bed unless the Empire itself was at stake. Fleet Admiral Krenval strode into the circular council chamber, still fastening the ceremonial clasps on his armor. The room was already buzzing with conversation. Dozens of voices overlapping as officers and advisors tried to make sense of what was happening. Holographic displays floated everywhere, showing the same mysterious vessel from every possible angle. Attention! Krenval's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The room fell silent immediately. Someone tell me what in the stars is going on out there. Intelligence Director Marceth stepped forward. She was older than most in the room, with scales that had faded to a dull gray, but her eyes were sharp as ever. She'd served 5 emperors and had seen everything the galaxy could throw at the Empire. Until now, Admiral, the situation has escalated significantly in the past 6 hours. The vessel, we're calling it Anomaly, one in official reports, has now bypassed 7 of our border checkpoints. We've sent multiple patrol squadrons to intercept. None have succeeded. To find not succeeded, Krenval demanded, moving to the central display table. Marceth brought up a recording. It showed 3 Korathian patrol ships moving into position to block the unknown vessel's path. The ships were positioned perfectly, forming a wall that nothing should have been able to pass without engaging. The mysterious ship approached at impossible speeds. Then, almost casually, it shifted direction. The maneuver was so smooth, so effortless, that it looked like someone had simply changed their mind about which route to take. No massive thruster burns. No violent course corrections. It just moved. The patrol ships scrambled to adjust. But by the time they begun turning, the intruder was already past them. "That's not possible," muttered General Vorth, the Empire's top tactical officer. The G-forces from a turn like that should have liquefied anyone inside that ship. "It gets worse," Marceth continued. She pulled up another recording. This one showed a different patrol squadron, clearly more aggressive. They'd fired warning shots, not across the bow this time, but much closer, almost grazing the vessel's hull. The room watched in silence as the unknown ship's response played out. No visible weapons appeared on its surface. No gun ports opened. But suddenly, thin beams of light, almost too faint to see, touched each of the patrol ships. Within seconds, every Korathian vessel went dark. What happened to them? Krenval asked, his voice tight. "That's the strange part, Admiral. Nothing happened to them. I mean, nothing permanent." Marceth zoomed in on one of the disabled ships. Their weapon systems were shut down, engines offline, navigation computers frozen, but life support? Perfectly fine. Communication systems? Still working. The crews reported no injuries, no casualties. They just couldn't fight anymore. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. Everyone in the room understood what this meant. It disabled them surgically. Science Advisor Thelkor said, his voice filled with something between awe and terror. Whatever technology that ship is using, it identified every critical system on our vessels and shut them down without causing any collateral damage. That level of precision is impossible, someone finished. "Apparently not," Marceth replied dryly. She pulled up a status board. "As of now, we've lost contact with 4 interceptor squadrons. Not destroyed, disabled. 73 ships, over 2,000 crew members, all alive and well, but completely unable to pursue the intruder. And, Admiral, here's what really concerns me. That ship could have destroyed them, easily. The power readings we're getting suggest it has weapons capabilities far beyond anything we can match. But it chose not to use them. It chose mercy." Mercy? Krenval's mandibles clicked together in a Korathian gesture of extreme agitation. "You call this mercy? An unknown force is driving through our territory like we don't exist. It's ignoring every attempt at communication, brushing aside our military like they're children playing with toys. This is an invasion, Director, a calculated show of force designed to intimidate us into submission." "Perhaps," Marceth said calmly. She'd dealt with angry admirals before. Or perhaps it's something else. "Admiral, we've been working around the clock to analyze the data from every encounter. 3 hours ago, we finally managed to decrypt a fragment of their communication signals." She brought up a new display. Strange symbols filled the holographic space. Characters unlike anything in the Imperial Linguistic Database. They were angular, simple, almost primitive-looking compared to the flowing script of Korathian writing. "We don't recognize the language," Marceth continued, "but we ran it through every translation protocol we have. The computers eventually found patterns, mathematical relationships, basic structural similarities to other known languages. It took every processing core in the intelligence division, but we got a partial translation. The symbols began rearranging themselves, transforming into Korathian script. A single word appeared: humans. The ship originates from a species calling themselves humans, Marseth explained. Their home world is designated by a simple name: Earth. Earth. Thelcor was already accessing the Imperial archives, his clawed fingers moving rapidly across his personal data pad. His expression shifted from curiosity to confusion. Admiral, this doesn't make sense. I'm pulling up the survey records now. Earth, yes, here it is. That entire sector was surveyed nearly 300 years ago during the Empire's expansion into the outer territories. He projected the old survey data into the shared display space. It showed a solar system, with detailed notes about each planet. When the file reached the third planet from the star, the data turned grim. Massive radiation signatures detected. Thelcor read aloud. Atmospheric composition consistent with large-scale nuclear or exotic particle events. Electromagnetic spectrum analysis suggests a previously advanced civilization suffered a catastrophic collapse. Surface conditions deemed incompatible with complex life. Status: dead world. Recommendation: avoid. No colonization value. He looked up at the assembled leaders. We marked that entire region as a dead zone. The radiation levels alone should have made it impossible for anything to survive there. If there was a civilization on Earth, and the surveys suggest there was, they should have been wiped out completely. But they weren't, Marseth said quietly. She brought up more translated data, rough and fragmented but readable. According to the information we've decoded from their transmissions, the catastrophe did happen. Some kind of cosmic event. The translation isn't clear, but it was devastating. The humans call it the burning. Half their world was simply erased in an instant. Billions dead. Their civilization shattered. The room was silent now. Everyone focused on the unfolding story. But they survived, Marseth continued. The fragments we've translated speak of desperate years, of struggling on a dying world, of having to evacuate to nearby space just to have breathable air. They survived in conditions we would consider impossible. And somehow, in that hostile environment, isolated from the rest of the galaxy, they didn't just survive, they advanced. She pulled up the technical analysis of the mysterious ship. The data was incomplete, but what they had was staggering. Their power generation systems are producing energy outputs we can't fully explain. The hull materials? We've never seen anything like them. Computer analysis suggests they might be using some kind of adaptive matter, materials that change their properties based on environmental conditions. Their propulsion system appears to be based on principles we don't even have theories for. Admiral Krenval studied the specifications, his tactical mind automatically calculating what this meant in combat terms. The numbers were sobering. Their technology is centuries beyond ours, he said flatly. Energy systems we can't comprehend. Materials science that makes our best warships look like they're built from scrap metal. If they wanted to attack us, wanted to conquer, he trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. They could, Marseth finished for him. Admiral, our analysts have run every combat simulation they can think of. If these humans are hostile, if they want to take our territory by force, we can't stop them, not with conventional military force. Then we use unconventional force, Krenval said, straightening up to his full imposing height. We assemble every warship we have in this sector. We show them that even if they have superior technology, we have numbers. We have determination. We have an empire that has stood for 5,000 years and will not bow to intimidation. Admiral, perhaps we should try to establish communication again, suggested one of the younger officers. Maybe. We've tried communication. Krenval's voice echoed through the chamber. They ignored our hails. They ignored our warning shots. They've disabled 4 squadrons of our ships. What more do we need to see? This is an act of war, and we will respond accordingly. Send out the orders. I want Battle Group Sigma assembled within 12 hours. Every available warship in this sector. If these humans want to challenge the Korathian Empire's sovereignty, we'll show them exactly what that means. Marceth looked like she wanted to argue further, but she held her tongue. She'd said her piece. The military had their way of thinking, and right now, that thinking was winning. As officers began filing out to execute the Admiral's orders, a priority alert flashed across the main display. Another message from the human vessel. This one was different. Longer, more complex. The translation computers worked quickly, processing the signal. 3 words appeared in perfect Korathian script, floating in the center of the holographic display, for everyone to see. We're going home. The exodus from the chamber stopped. Everyone turned to stare at those 3 simple words. Going home. General Vorth said slowly, "What does that mean? Earth is a dead world. We surveyed it ourselves." Thelkor pulled up a star chart, plotting the human vessel's trajectory. His hands moved quickly, calculating, cross-referencing with old Imperial survey data. When he saw the result, his face went pale. "Admiral," he said quietly, "I know where they're going. The trajectory matches perfectly. They're heading for the Ralesh system." Ralesh? Krenval pulled up the system data. That's one of our thriving colonies. 40 million citizens, 3 major cities, agricultural centers that supply half the outer territories. Why would... He stopped as understanding dawned. "Because Ralesh 3 is Earth," Marceth said softly. 300 years ago, we found a dead world and colonized it. We built cities on the ruins of their civilization. We never thought anyone would come back, because we thought everyone was dead. But they weren't dead. They were out there, rebuilding, surviving, waiting. The full weight of the situation settled over the room like a physical force. "They're not invading," Thelkor whispered. "They're returning, coming back to reclaim their home world. And we're living on it." Admiral Krenval stared at the star chart, at the trajectory that ended at one of the Empire's most successful colonies, and felt the certainty drain from his resolve. "May the stars have mercy on us all," he said quietly. For once, no one in the high command disagreed. The fabric of space rippled, and Torres' 37 warships dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously. It was a perfectly executed military maneuver, the kind that took years of training and coordination to pull off. Battle Group Sigma had arrived, and they meant business. Admiral Krenval stood on the bridge of his flagship, the dreadnought Inevitable Victory. The name had always seemed appropriate before, but now, staring at the sensor readings of the human vessel, he wondered if perhaps it was tempting fate. "Formation holding steady, Admiral," reported his navigation officer. "All ships in position. We have the target completely surrounded." Krenval nodded, studying the tactical display. 37 of the Empire's finest warships arranged a sphere around a single vessel. It should have been overkill. It should have been so overwhelming that the humans would immediately surrender. But something in his gut told him this wasn't going to be that simple. "Sir, I'm getting a visual on the target now," his tactical officer said, bringing up the main view screen. The human ship appeared, and Krenval heard several crew members gasp. It was small, barely the size of a heavy cruiser. Compared to the massive dreadnoughts and battlecruisers of Battle Group Sigma, it looked almost delicate. "That's it?" the tactical officer blurted out before he could stop himself. "Sir, with respect, that ship is tiny. It's barely larger than our escort frigates. Size doesn't matter when you're dealing with technology we don't understand," Krenval replied, though he understood the officer's confusion. The Empire had always equated size with power. Bigger ships meant more weapons, more armor, more capability. But this vessel challenged that assumption. The human ship hung in the void like a silver needle against the darkness of space. Its hull was smooth, almost flowing, as if it had been grown rather than built. There were no obvious weapon ports, no jutting cannons or missile tubes, no visible shield emitters or defensive arrays. It looked more like a piece of art than a warship. "It doesn't even look armed," someone muttered. "Don't be fooled," Krenval warned, remembering the reports from the disabled patrol squadrons. "This ship has taken down 73 of our vessels without breaking stride. It's armed. We just can't see how." He straightened his armor and moved to the communication station. "Open a channel. All frequencies. I want them to hear this loud and clear. The communications officer worked his controls. Channel open, Admiral. Krenval took a breath and began speaking, his voice carrying the full weight of Imperial authority. This is Admiral Krenval of the Korathian Imperial Navy to the unidentified human vessel. You have violated our sovereign space, ignored all diplomatic protocols, and refused to respond to legitimate authority. This ends now. Power down your engines immediately and prepare to be boarded. If you do not comply, we are authorized to use lethal force. You have 1 standard minute to respond and comply. He cut the channel and waited, watching the chronometer count down. The bridge was silent, except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Every eye was on the display, watching the human vessel for any sign of movement. 60 seconds. 59. 58. The ship didn't move, didn't power down, didn't show any indication that it had even heard the message. 30 seconds, Admiral, the tactical officer reported. Krenval felt his jaw tighten. They were really going to make him do this. They were really going to force him to open fire on what might be an exploration vessel, a diplomatic ship, or something else entirely non-military. 15 seconds. Still nothing from the human ship. It just hung there, silver and silent, and completely unintimidated by the firepower surrounding it. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2. Admiral, we're receiving transmission, the communications officer interrupted. Audio only. And sir, it's in our language. Perfect Korathian. Put it through, Krenval ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was unlike anything they'd heard before. It was clearly alien. The pitch was different, the rhythm of speech unfamiliar. But the words were flawless Korathian, and the voice belonged to a woman. This is Captain Rebecca Mason of the Earth Colonial Service vessel homebound. The voice said, calm and measured, Admiral Krenval, I've been listening to your communications. I understand your position, but I need you to understand mine. We have no desire for conflict with your people. We truly don't, but we will not be stopped. We cannot be stopped. I'm asking you, as one ship captain to another, please reconsider what you're about to do. Stand down. Let us pass. No one needs to get hurt today. The audacity of it struck Krenval like a physical blow. This human, this Captain Mason, was surrounded by overwhelming military force, and she was asking him to stand down, as if she was the one in a position of strength. You're in no position to make demands, Captain, he replied, his voice hard. You are one ship against an entire battle group, 37 of the Empire's finest warships. You cannot possibly hope to fight us all. I'm offering you one last chance. Surrender now, and you will be treated fairly under Imperial law. Refuse, and we will be forced to disable or destroy your vessel. There was a pause. When Captain Mason spoke again, her voice carried a note of genuine sadness that caught Krenval off guard. Admiral, you don't understand what you're facing. You can't understand because you haven't been where we've been. You haven't survived what we've survived. I'm not making demands. I'm trying to prevent a tragedy. Please, I'm begging you. Stand down your weapons. Let us pass. Don't make me do this. The word sent a chill down Krenval's spine, but he pushed the feeling aside. This was a bluff. It had to be. One ship, no matter how advanced, couldn't stand against an entire battle group. All ships, he said, opening the fleet-wide channel. Target the human vessel. Weapons free. Fire at will. What happened next would be analyzed by Imperial military strategists for generations to come, though they would never fully understand it. The void around a homebound suddenly erupted into a storm of destruction. Plasma cannons from 36 warships opened fire simultaneously, sending bolts of superheated matter streaking through space. Railguns launched solid projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. Missile swarms spiraled out from the fleet, hundreds of warheads converging on a single point. It was enough firepower to crack open a moon, enough destructive energy to glass an entire continent. The combined assault of Battle Group Sigma was something no single vessel should have been able to survive. The crew of the inevitable Victory watched their displays, expecting to see the human ship vaporize in the first salvo. Instead, they saw something that would haunt their dreams. Shields materialized around the homebound, but not like any shields they'd ever encountered. Most defensive screens were barely visible, maybe a slight shimmer when struck. These shields were brilliant, vibrant, shifting through colors that shouldn't exist. Purples that hurt to look at, greens that seemed to fold space around them, blues, so deep they looked like holes in reality. Every plasma bolt that struck them simply stopped. The energy didn't reflect away or dissipate. It just ceased to exist, as if the shields were draining the very concept of the attack out of existence. Railgun rounds froze in mid-flight, hanging motionless for a split second before being gently pushed aside like someone brushing away gnats. The missiles were the most disturbing. As they approached the human ship, they simply powered down, their warheads failing to detonate. They drifted past harmlessly, dead chunks of metal and explosive that had been rendered completely inert. Impossible, Krenval whispered, but the word fell hollow. He was watching it happen. It was clearly possible. All ships. Continue firing, he ordered, but his voice lacked the certainty it had held moments before. For 30 full seconds, Battle Group Sigma poured everything they had into the human vessel. Every weapon, every system, every ounce of destructive capability. The space around the homebound was so saturated with fire that the sensors could barely track individual shots anymore. The human ship sat at the center of the maelstrom, completely untouched. The shields didn't even look strained. They just absorbed everything, as casually as a person might brush off a light rain. "Admiral, weapons are overheating across the fleet," his tactical officer reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "Multiple ships are reporting power fluctuations from the sustained fire. We need to cycle the systems or we'll damage them." "Cease fire," Krenval ordered quietly. All ships cease fire. The storm of destruction stopped. The void fell silent again, except for the ringing in everyone's ears and the pounding of their hearts. The human ship hung there, unmarked, undamaged, as pristine as it had been before the battle began. "Captain Mason," Krenval said, his voice hoarse, "you've made your point." "I wish I didn't have to, Admiral," came the response. "Now, please, let me show you something else. Something I hope will help you understand." "Understand what?" "Why we're here, what we've been through, and why we won't, be turned away from going home." Before Krenval could respond, the human ship's weapons activated. No ports open on its hull. No turrets rotated into position. One moment the vessel was passive. The next, beams of pure white light, so thin they were almost invisible, reached out to touch each ship in Battle Group Sigma. Evasive action. Krenval shouted, but it was far too late. The beams moved faster than thought, faster than any targeting computer could track. They touched the inevitable Victory and 36 other warships in the span of perhaps 2 seconds. Krenval felt his ship shudder. Then, suddenly, everything went dark. The main lights died. The tactical displays flickered and went offline. The hum of the engines faded to nothing. "Report," he barked. His crew frantically worked their stations, but most of the controls were unresponsive. "Sir, weapon systems are completely offline. Engines are down. Navigation computers aren't responding. But..." The officer paused, checking his readings again. "Life support is fine. Emergency lighting is coming on. Communications are still working. It's like they surgically disabled everything that could hurt them, but left everything that keeps us alive." Krenval moved to a working console and pulled up fleet-wide status. Every single ship showed the same pattern. Weapons offline. Engines dead. Navigation frozen. But every crew member alive and well, with full life support and even their communication systems intact. "They could have killed us," he said quietly. "Every ship in this battle group. They could have wiped us out in seconds. Instead, they just turned off our weapons." A new transmission came through from the homebound. Captain Mason's voice filled the bridge again, and this time there was no mistaking the weariness in it. "Admiral, I'm truly sorry it came to this. I'm uploading our complete historical records to your ship's computers right now. Everything about who we are, where we come from, and what happened to us. You deserve to understand. We're not your enemies. We're not conquerors. We're just people trying to go home." As the data began streaming in, Krenval pulled it up on one of the few working displays. What he read in the first few minutes changed everything he thought he knew about the situation. Earth had been a thriving world with billions of people. Then, without warning, a cosmic disaster struck. A gamma ray burst from a dying star light years away. Half the planet was simply erased in an instant, billions dead before they even knew what was happening. The survivors faced a dying world, toxic atmosphere, radiation levels that should have killed them. They should have gone extinct. Instead, they fought. They adapted. They developed technology born not from curiosity or military ambition, but from desperate necessity. For 200 years, they'd struggled in isolation, rebuilding from ashes, creating innovations that the comfortable civilizations of the galaxy had never needed to invent. And now they were coming home. Admiral, his communications officer said quietly, Captain Mason is asking where we're headed, where they're going. Krenval pulled up the star chart, plotting the homebound trajectory one more time. The destination was unmistakable now. Tell her, he said heavily, that she's heading for the Raleigh system, specifically the third planet, the one we've colonized for the past 300 years. He paused. Tell her we call it Raleigh 3. Ask her what she calls it. A moment later, Captain Mason's response came back, and though they couldn't see her face, everyone on the bridge could hear the emotion in those two simple words. We call it Earth. Emperor Valthan hadn't slept in 2 days. Dark circles shadowed his eyes as he stood before the massive observation window of the Imperial Palace, hands clasped behind his back. Below him, the capital city of Karath Prime stretched out in all its glory, gleaming spires that caught the morning light, transport lanes filled with thousands of vehicles, monuments to 5,000 years of unbroken imperial rule. It had never looked more fragile. Behind him, the council chamber had descended into something he'd never witnessed in his 20 years as emperor. Complete chaos. Voices overlapped, people shouted over each other, and at least 3 different arguments were happening simultaneously. His advisors, normally so controlled, so dignified, were yelling like merchants in a bazaar. Enough! Valthan didn't raise his voice, but something in his tone cut through the noise like a knife. The room fell silent immediately. He still didn't turn around. Someone tell me, in simple terms, what our situation is. Intelligence Director Marseth, you first. Marseth stepped forward, datapad in hand. Her voice was steady, professional, but Valthan had known her long enough to hear the underlying strain. Your Majesty, we cannot stop the human vessel currently in orbit around Raleigh 3. Our analysis of the battle, if we can even call it that, with Battle Group Sigma suggests the homebound was operating at perhaps 30% of its actual capability. 30%, Valthan repeated quietly, and they disabled our entire battle group. Yes, Your Majesty, in under 3 seconds. Surgical strikes that knocked out weapons and propulsion, but left every crew member unharmed. They could have destroyed all 37 ships. They chose not to. That's supposed to make us feel better? General Cortrin growled from across the room. They humiliated our finest military forces. They showed restraint. Marseth countered sharply. There's a difference. Valthan finally turned from the window. Continue your report, Director. You said the homebound isn't alone. No, Your Majesty. Our long-range sensor stations have detected multiple hyperspace signatures approaching from the Galactic Rim, the same region the homebound came from. More human ships are coming. The Emperor felt something cold settle in his stomach. How many more? At least 40 vessels that we can confirm. Possibly more. The signatures suggest each has similar or greater capabilities compared to the homebound. Marseth pulled up a holographic display showing the approaching fleet. Based on their current speed, they'll arrive within the next week. 40 ships, Valthan said softly, any one of which could apparently cripple a battle group. Yes, Your Majesty. The room fell silent. Even Cortrin had nothing to say to that. The implications were staggering. The Korathian Empire had stood for 5 millennia, had conquered or absorbed dozens of civilizations, had never faced a military threat it couldn't overcome. Until now. And these humans, Valthan continued, moving to the council table, what exactly do they want? besides our colony world. They call it Earth, Your Majesty, Admiral Crenval spoke up. He looked exhausted, still wearing his uniform from the engagement. It's their ancestral homeworld. The planet we colonized 300 years ago. We thought it was dead. We surveyed it, found it empty, claimed it fairly under all established protocols. We had every right to settle there. Except the original inhabitants weren't dead, Valthan said. They were just somewhere else. Exactly, Your Majesty. From their perspective, we're occupiers, squatters living on their property while they were away dealing with catastrophe. General Cortrin slammed his fist on the table, making several data pads jump. We have 40 million citizens on that world. 40 million Kolrathians who were born there, who've built lives there, who consider it home. Are we supposed to just abandon them? Just hand over an entire colony because these humans show up with superior weapons and make demands? They haven't made demands, Marsa corrected. They've made a request. There's a difference. A request backed by overwhelming force. A request they can force without asking. Marseth shot back. General, did you read the full report? They disabled Battle Group Sigma without killing a single crew member. They've been in orbit around Ral S3 for 3 days with weapons that could level cities, and they haven't fired a single shot at the surface. They're not acting like conquerors. They're acting like people trying to reclaim what's theirs. That doesn't change the fact that giving up the colony will make us look weak. Cortrin argued. Every border dispute we have, every territorial claim, every rival power, they'll all see this as proof that the Empire can be pushed around. If we show weakness now, we invite challenges everywhere. And if we fight... Marsetha's voice was cold. Did you not understand what I said, General? Intelligence estimates suggest their actual weapons capabilities could sterilize entire planets. Not conquer, sterilize. We've analyzed the energy signatures from a homebound's defensive systems alone, and the numbers are terrifying. If they wanted to, they could glass Roush 3 from orbit, and there's nothing we could do to stop them. Then we evacuate our people and do it first. Cortrin was on his feet now. If we can't have the planet, we make sure they can't either. We glass it ourselves before they arrive in force. Send a message that the Empire doesn't surrender territory, even to a superior foe. The suggestion hung in the air like poison gas. Several advisors looked shocked. Others nodded slowly, considering it. You want to destroy an entire planet, Valthan said quietly. Rather than negotiate, I want to preserve Imperial sovereignty, Your Majesty. Sometimes that requires difficult choices. That's not strategy, Marseth said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. That's petulant destruction. That's a child breaking a toy rather than sharing it. It would start a war we cannot possibly win. Against a species that actually has the moral high ground in this dispute. Moral high ground? Cortrin laughed bitterly. Since when does that matter in galactic politics? Since we're facing people who could crush us but are choosing not to, Marseth replied. General, use your brain. These humans have technology centuries beyond ours. They could have destroyed every ship they encountered. Instead, they disabled them carefully. They could have bombed Ral S3 and claimed it by force. Instead, they're sitting in orbit waiting, trying to talk. What does that tell you? That they're weak, that they lack the will to, that they're civilized. Marseth interrupted, that despite having overwhelming power, they're trying to resolve this peacefully. And if we respond to that with violence, with scorched earth tactics, we won't just lose the war. We'll deserve to lose it. Enough, Valthan said quietly. Both fell silent. Director Marseth, you mentioned the colonists. What's the situation on the ground? His civilian advisor, an older woman named Saltharier, stepped forward. It's not good, Your Majesty. The human ship has been visible in the sky for 3 days now. Everyone knows it's there. Everyone knows it could attack at any moment, but hasn't. The psychological impact is severe. People are afraid to leave their homes. Some are demanding we fight. Others are begging to be evacuated. The colonial government is barely holding things together. And the humans? Valthan asked, have they communicated with the colonists directly? Only through official channels to the colonial governor, Saltheria replied. They've been very careful not to incite panic. They've even offered to help with evacuation logistics if we agree to transition protocols. Transition protocols? Valthan raised an eyebrow. What exactly are they proposing? Marseth brought up a new file. Captain Mason has been surprisingly forthcoming, Your Majesty. She sent detailed proposals. Everything laid out clearly, nothing hidden. They're offering full compensation for the relocation of our colonists. What kind of compensation? Technology transfers, for one. Medical advances that our scientists estimate could extend average Korathian lifespan by 30 to 40 years. Manufacturing techniques that would revolutionize our industrial capacity. Energy systems that would make power generation costs practically negligible. Valthan leaned forward, interested despite himself. Continue. They're also offering resource rights in star systems they've already surveyed but don't need for their own expansion. 3 unclaimed systems with habitable worlds. Not just marginal planets, Your Majesty, but prime real estate. With their terraforming assistance, these worlds could actually be more valuable than Ral Esh 3 ever was. They're offering us better worlds to replace the one they're taking? Cortrin said skeptically. Why? Because they understand we have legitimate interests, Marseth replied. They're not trying to punish us. They just want their homeworld back. Everything in their proposal suggests they're trying to make this as fair as possible under the circumstances. There's more, Admiral Krenval added. They're proposing a formal alliance between humanity and the Empire, military cooperation, technology sharing, joint security arrangements. They're essentially offering us a partnership as equals. Equals? Cortrin scoffed. When they have weapons that make ours look like children's toys. Yes, equals. Krenval said firmly. I spoke with Captain Mason after the engagement. She was respectful, professional. She apologized for disabling our ships. She made it clear that humanity doesn't want to be our enemies. They want to be our allies. Valthan studied his admiral carefully. You believe her? I do, Your Majesty. They could have destroyed my entire fleet. They had every tactical advantage. Instead, they rendered us helpless without killing anyone, then immediately opened communications to explain themselves. That's not the behavior of conquerors. That's the behavior of people who understand what it means to survive against impossible odds and don't want to inflict unnecessary suffering. They want to be our allies after we try to destroy their ship? Valthan asked, his tone skeptical. Marseth nodded. According to Captain Mason's communications, they understand it was a defensive reaction based on misunderstanding and fear. Her exact words were, "We know what it's like to fight for survival. We don't judge you for defending what you thought was yours. Your Majesty, they're offering us a way out of this that preserves our dignity and actually benefits us." Benefits us? Cortrin shook his head. We lose a colony world with 40 million citizens. We gain 3 new worlds, revolutionary technology, extended lifespans for our people, and an alliance with the most advanced military force we've ever encountered. Marseth countered. General, I know you're focused on the short-term loss, but think long-term. Think about what the Empire gains from this. Valthan walked to the star chart display, studying positions of the human ships, the location of Ral 3, the vastness of Imperial space. He'd been Emperor for 20 years. He'd made countless difficult decisions, but nothing compared to this. If we fight, he said slowly, thinking aloud, we lose. The military assessments are clear on that. Even if we threw every ship we have at them, we'd be slaughtered. And for what? To defend our occupation of their homeworld. It's been our world for 300 years, Cortrin said, but his voice lacked conviction now. It was theirs for thousands of years before that, Valthan replied, and they never left by choice. They were driven away by catastrophe. Now they survived, rebuilt, and returned. What would we do in their position? Would we not fight for our homeworld? He turned to face his council. I'm not going to sacrifice millions of Korathian lives in an unwinnable war to hold territory that belongs to someone else. Director Marseth, open formal negotiations with Captain Mason. I want to meet her, face to face. No fleets, no weapons, just two leaders trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Your Majesty, Court Wren protested. Meeting her in person is too dangerous. Dangerous? Valthan smiled grimly. General, if they wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. If Captain Mason is willing to sit across from me and talk, the least I can do is show her the same courage she's shown by not simply taking what she wants by force. He straightened. Decision made. Contact the humans. Arrange a summit. We have 40 million people who need new homes, and apparently we have allies who can help us build them. Let's see if we can turn this crisis into an opportunity. As his advisors moved to carry out his orders, Valthan returned to the window. The city below looked the same as it had an hour ago, but everything had changed. The Empire was about to navigate its greatest challenge, not through conquest, but through compromise. It would be interesting to see where that path led. 18 months. That's how long it had been since Commander Vraltek first detected that impossible ship crossing into Imperial space. 18 months since his world had been turned upside down by 3 simple words. We're going home. Now he stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, a brand new diplomatic facility that hadn't even existed a year ago. It orbited a planet that the Korathians had once called Ral-3, but which now bore its original name again, Earth. Vraltek pressed a scaled hand against the transparent viewing port, looking down at the world below. It was almost unrecognizable from the survey reports he'd reviewed from 3 centuries ago. Back then, it had been a dead planet, irradiated, toxic, lifeless. Now, massive terraforming installations dotted the surface like silver flowers blooming across the continents. He could see the shimmer of atmospheric processors working to scrub the remaining radiation from the air. Vast biodomes covered what had once been wasteland, slowly coaxing Earth's damaged ecosystems back to life. Rivers that had run dry for centuries were flowing again. Forests were beginning to grow where there had been only ash. The humans had arrived in waves over the past year. First came the engineers and scientists, setting up the infrastructure, then the construction crews, building settlements that grew from tiny outposts to sprawling cities in a matter of months. Now nearly 2 million people lived on the surface, with millions more in the orbital habitats that ringed the planet like a necklace of lights. Strange, isn't it? The voice startled him from his thoughts. Vraltek turned to see Captain Rebecca Mason standing beside him, except she wasn't just a captain anymore. She now carried the official title of Human Ambassador to the Korathian Empire, along with about a dozen other responsibilities that seemed to keep her constantly busy. Over the past 18 months, they'd worked together extensively during what the diplomats called the transition period, though Vraltek privately thought control chaos was a more accurate description. Somewhere along the way, he developed a grudging respect for the human leader. She was direct, honest, and had a remarkable ability to solve problems that seemed impossible. "What's strange, Ambassador?" he asked, using her formal title even though she told him repeatedly to just call her by her name. Rebecca smiled. It was a peculiar expression. Humans showed emotion through facial movements in ways that Korathians didn't. It had taken him months to learn to read them properly. This particular smile seemed to carry both amusement and something like nostalgia. That you were the one who first detected us. You were the person who sent out those identification protocols that we ignored. You fired those warning shots that we flew right past. She gestured at the planet below them. And now here we are, standing together on a station that represents everything we built together. Colleagues, partners. If someone had told me back then that this is where we'd end up, I thought they were completely insane. Vraltek made the clicking sound that passed for Korathian laughter. If someone had told me that the Empire would voluntarily hand over one of its most successful colony worlds, I would have agreed with your assessment. Yet here we are indeed. He paused, watching as a human transport vessel descended toward the planet's surface. The transition hasn't been smooth. That's putting it mildly, Rebecca agreed. I've read the reports about the protests on Kalrath Prime. Nationalist groups calling the Emperor a traitor. Colonial advocacy movements demanding compensation. It must have been difficult for your people. It was, Vraltek admitted. There were moments when I thought violence might erupt. 40 million people. That's how many Korathians were living on Ral Esh-3. 40 million people who suddenly had to leave their homes, pack up their entire lives, and move to worlds they'd never seen. Some of them were angry. Some felt abandoned. There were protests, demonstrations, even a few attempted riots. He turned to look at her directly. But your people kept their word. Every promise you made, you fulfilled. The transport vessels you provided made the evacuation possible. Ships more advanced than anything in our fleet, moving people safely and quickly. The 3 new colony worlds you identified turned out to be even better than you described. New hope, new prosperity, and new dawn, Rebecca said, reciting the names of Korathian colonists had given their new homes. I visited New Hope last month. The settlements are growing faster than anyone expected. The terraforming assistance we provided is working better than our models predicted. Give it another 5 years, and those worlds will be paradise planets. They already are in many ways, Vraltek said. Better farmland than Ral Esh-3 had, richer mineral deposits, more stable weather patterns. Some of the colonists are actually saying they're glad they had to relocate. He paused. Not all of them, of course. Some still resent being forced to move. But the complaints are getting quieter as people see how much they've gained. Rebecca nodded, looking back out at Earth. The medical technology sharing. How's that going? It's revolutionary, Vraltek said without hesitation. The treatments you provided for cellular regeneration have already prevented an epidemic in the outer territories. Our projections suggested we'd lose millions to the plague. Instead, we lost fewer than 1,000. The Empire's medical establishment is calling it the greatest advancement in Korathian healthcare in 5 centuries. I'm glad we could help, Rebecca said simply. We lost too many people to preventable diseases during the dark years after the burning. If our suffering can help prevent yours, then at least something good came from it. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the activity around Earth. Construction vessels moved between the orbital habitats. Transport ships ferried supplies from the outer system. A massive human colony ship, one of the last to arrive, was slowly maneuvering into a parking orbit, its mission complete. How is Emperor Valthan handling the political situation? Rebecca asked after a while. I know this hasn't been easy for him. Vraltek considered the question carefully. Better than most expected, honestly. The technology transfers have silenced many of his critics. When you can point to citizens living 30 years longer because of human medical science, when you can show farmers producing twice the crop yields with the agricultural techniques you shared, when you can demonstrate that our industrial output has increased by 40% thanks to your manufacturing processes, well, it becomes very difficult to argue that the deal was bad for the Empire. But there are still critics, Rebecca said. It wasn't a question. Of course, there always are. Some say we surrendered too easily. Others claim we should have fought. That die with honor is better than living through compromise. The more extreme nationalist groups call Valthan a coward. Vraltek's mandibles clicked in what Rebecca had learned was his version of a frustrated sigh. But they're minority. Most Korathians see the benefits. They see that we're stronger now than we were before you arrived. What about the military? I know General Cortrin wasn't exactly happy with the Emperor's decision. Cortrin resigned 6 months ago, Vraltek reported. He couldn't accept the new reality. Couldn't adapt to the idea that strength doesn't always mean military dominance. Admiral Krenval took his place as chief military advisor. Krenval, Rebecca raised an eyebrow. The admiral who commanded Battle Group Sigma? The one who ordered his fleet to fire on us. The same. And before you ask, yes, I was surprised too. But Krenval understood something that Cortrin never could. He understood that you could have destroyed his entire fleet, but you chose mercy instead. That lesson changed him. He's become one of the strongest advocates for the Human-Korathian alliance. Rebecca smiled again. I'd like to meet him properly sometime. Compare notes about that engagement. I have to admit, when we saw 37 warships drop out of hyperspace around us, my heart rate definitely increased. You were afraid? Vraltek asked, surprised. You seemed so confident during the communications. I was terrified, Rebecca admitted. I had 43,000 people on my ship. Families, children, elderly colonists who'd never seen Earth but had spent their whole lives dreaming of returning. I was responsible for all of them. If I'd miscalculated, if your admiral had been more aggressive, if our defensive systems had failed. She shook her head. Let's just say I'm very glad it worked out the way it did. As am I, Vral Tech said quietly. I've seen the casualty projections. If we continued the engagement, they were sobering. A priority communication alert interrupted their conversation. Vral Tech pulled out his personal communicator and read the message, his expression shifting. What is it? Rebecca asked, noting the change. News from the frontier. The Vrothian Confederation has made first contact with another unknown species near their border. They're requesting human assistance with communication protocols and first contact procedures. He looked up at her. Apparently, they don't want to make the same mistakes we did. Rebecca laughed, a sound that still seemed strange to Korathian ears, but that Vral Tech had grown accustomed to. 6 months ago, the Vrothians were threatening to declare us enemies of the Galactic Order. Now they want our help. Fear makes strange allies, Vral Tech observed. But at least they're choosing cooperation over confrontation. That's progress. It is, Rebecca agreed, already pulling up her own communication device. I'll contact Admiral Davis and see what resources we can spare. This could be a good opportunity to demonstrate that we're serious about helping stabilize a region, not just reclaiming our own territory. As she worked, Vral Tech watched more ships arrive in Earth's orbit, human vessels mostly, but he spotted several Korathian ships as well, trade vessels, diplomatic shuttles, even a few tourist transports. The species that had almost gone to war 18 months ago were now doing business together, traveling to each other's worlds, learning from each other. Ambassador, he said after a moment, I wanted to thank you. Rebecca looked up from her communicator. For what? For being patient with us. For not simply taking what you wanted by force, even though you could have. For understanding that we weren't your enemies. Just people who didn't know any better. He paused, searching for the right words. You could have started a war. Instead, you helped prevent one. That took more strength than most people realize. Rebecca's expression softened. Commander, I spent most of my life watching humanity struggle to survive. I saw people die from preventable problems because we were too busy fighting each other instead of working together. When we finally learned to cooperate, to put aside our differences and unite, that's when we started to thrive. She gestured at Earth below them. We're not trying to build an empire. We're trying to build something better. A galaxy where different species can work together, where conflicts are resolved through dialogue instead of weapons, where no one has to face extinction alone. A noble goal, Vral Tech said. A necessary one, Rebecca corrected, because the alternative is going back to isolation and mistrust, and we've all seen where that leads. 3 months later, the Grand Summit convened. Representatives from 7 major galactic powers gathered aboard a massive diplomatic station, constructed jointly by Korathian and human engineers in record time, to discuss what Emperor Valthan called a new framework for galactic cooperation. Commander Vral Tech attended as part of the Korathian delegation, watching as leaders from across the sector arrived. The Vrothians sent their entire High Council. The Sendari Collective dispatched their most senior diplomats. Even the reclusive Tharnak sovereignty, who hadn't participated in multi-species diplomacy in over a century, sent observers. Everyone wanted to understand the humans. Everyone wanted to know what had made them so formidable. Everyone wanted to learn if they too could benefit from an alliance with these strange newcomers who had technology centuries beyond the galactic standard. Admiral Jessica Davis gave the opening address. She was older than Captain Mason, her hair completely gray, her face marked by lines that spoke of decades of difficult decisions. She'd commanded humanity's defense forces for over 70 years, and her presence carried a weight that even the most skeptical delegates couldn't ignore. 207 years ago, she began, her voice amplified to fill a massive chamber, my ancestors faced annihilation. The translation systems worked overtime, rendering her words into dozens of languages simultaneously. Every delegate listened in silence. In a single day, half of our world died. Billions of people, gone in an instant. The survivors faced a dying planet, toxic air, radiation that should have killed them. They should have gone extinct. Instead, they chose to survive. Davis paused, letting that sink in. We didn't survive because we were stronger than anyone else. We didn't survive because we were smarter or tougher or more determined. We survived because we had no other choice and because we learned, painfully slowly, that working together was the only path forward. Every human alive today is descended from people who put aside their conflicts and united in the face of existential threat. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from species who had never trusted each other. We bring that lesson to you now, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as partners who understand that the universe is vast and often hostile. Threats exist out there that make our various territorial disputes look like children arguing over toys. Together, we can face them. Divided, we all risk following Earth's example, nearly destroyed by forces beyond our control. The summit lasted 2 weeks. Treaties were drafted, technology-sharing agreements negotiated, mutual defense pacts signed. Not every power joined immediately. Some remained suspicious. Others wanted to maintain their independence. But enough agreed to form a foundation of what would become the Galactic Coalition. On the final day, Emperor Valthan and Admiral Davis stood together before the assembled delegates. A year and a half ago, Valthan said, humanity was unknown to us. A year ago, they were perceived as a threat. Today, they are our allies and partners in building a better future. He paused, looking at Davis. Let this be a lesson. Those who seem most dangerous may actually be those we need most. Vraltek found himself assigned to a new position after the summit. Deputy Director of Coalition Security, working under both Korathian and human command. It was, he reflected with amusement, a strange career path for someone who'd started all this by detecting an impossible ship that refused to stop. He met with Rebecca one last time before she returned to Earth to begin her permanent assignment as humanity's chief representative to the Coalition. Do you think it will last? He asked her as they stood once more at the observation window, watching her turn below them. This alliance, this cooperation, do you think it's real or just temporary convenience? Rebecca was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. I think it has to be real, she said finally, because the alternative is going back to isolation and mistrust, and we've all seen the cost of that. Will there be challenges? Absolutely. Will some members cheat or break agreements? Probably. Will there be moments when everything seems ready to fall apart? Without a doubt. She turned to look at him directly. But we've established something important, Commander. We've proven that different species can work together for mutual benefit. We've shown that strength doesn't have to mean dominance, that power can be used to protect rather than conquer. That's worth fighting for. That's worth the effort it takes to maintain. And Earth, Vraltek asked, gesturing at the healing world below, will you stay involved with Coalition affairs, or focus on rebuilding your home world? Both, Rebecca said with a slight smile. Earth needs advocates in the Coalition, people who remember what we fought for, why we came back. But Earth also needs people who understand that our future isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone. I won't forget either duty. Her shuttle departed an hour later. Vraltek watched it go, then returned to his new office and reviewed the latest reports. Human technology was being integrated into Imperial infrastructure. Joint defense patrols were being established along contested borders. The Vrothian Confederation had successfully made peaceful first contact with the unknown species, using protocols developed by human xenologists. The galaxy was changing, and perhaps Vraltek thought that vessel that had refused to stop had been exactly what they all needed, a wake-up call that forced complacent civilizations to recognize they weren't alone in their struggles. On Earth below, the first generation of children born since humanity's return played in gardens, still being coaxed back to life. They would grow up in a world being rebuilt, in a galaxy learning cooperation, in a future that had almost been lost but was now full of possibilities. The human ship had refused to stop, and in doing so, it started something that couldn't be stopped. A new era for everyone.